May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? We are now ready to begin this morning's 2019 Memorial Day program. A program for remembering those individuals who gave their lives while serving in our armed forces. I'm Jerry Brow, a life member of both American Legion Post 301 and Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 21 here in Connellsville. And I'm honored to be introducing the participants in today's Memorial Day program. The parade, the Crawford Avenue Bridge Memorial Wreath Program, and this program were organized by the Connellsville Veterans Commission. The Veterans Commission is comprised of members from Connellsville Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 21, Trotter American Legion Post 762, and Connellsville American Legion Post 301. Glenn Seipel is president of the commission, and Tom McFadden is secretary. On behalf of the Connellsville Veterans Commission, we thank all of the participants in today's activities. 2019 is a special year for honoring our military and military support organizations. First of all, 2019 marks the 75th anniversary of the June 6, 1944 D-Day invasion of France that ultimately liberated Europe from the forces of Germany. Secondly, it marks the 100th anniversary of the official founding of the American Legion organization and the Milton L. Bishop American Legion Post 301 here in Connellsville. And thirdly, 2019 marks the 100th anniversary of Connellsville's own Max C. Floto starting the movement that ultimately resulted in Armistice Day, later renamed Veterans Day, becoming a national holiday in 1938. A national holiday born right here in Connellsville, Pennsylvania. At this time, our national anthem will be sung by Ronald Schroyer, United States Navy retired Master Chief Petty Officer. Immediately following the national anthem, we will bow our heads as Reverend Mark Schultes, pastor of Pennsville and Normalville United Methodist Churches, leads us in prayer. May we have our national anthem, please.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and the bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare of bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Let us pray. Sovereign God, creator and sustainer of all people, we ask your blessing upon us gathered here in remembrance of those who gave the ultimate sacrifice of their lives in service to their God, to their country, to their families. We ask your presence to be with us. May we never forget the honor of their service. We ask your blessings upon their families, upon all heritage behind them, and may we be found faithful to your cause and to the cause of this nation, to those who would follow behind us. We ask in your precious name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Schultes, for our prayer, and to Ronald Schroer for the singing of our national anthem. Glenn Seipel, Commander of Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 21 and Commander of the Day, will now offer brief remarks.
This is the National Day of Memorial, time when in mind and in thought our glorious past is made to live again, and the noble men who shaped and molded its destiny, though dead, are to memory once more instinct with life and being. It is the hour when a nation awakes to remembrance of deeds of heroism performed in its defense, the day when loyal people, grateful for service rendered their country, unite to honor their patriot dead, and to enrich and ennoble their own lives by recalling a public valor and a private worth that are immortal, and to encourage by their solemn service a more zealous and abiding patriotism in the heart of life of every American citizen. Differences of party, creed, and sect today are forgotten, while north and south, east and west, all over our broad land, our people with reverent hearts circle the sacred mounds where sleep our country's dead. Therefore, with regard for the dead, let us mingle a tender sympathy for the living who mourn for the loved ones they have lost.
Thank you, Commander Seipel. Thomas McFadden, Adjutant of American Legion Post 301 in Connellsville, and Officer of the Day, will also offer brief remarks.
Comrades, on this monument, we place this full tribute to those comrades who defended the integrity of our great nation.
Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Stefano, Battalion Commander of the Connellsville Area High School Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, Cadet Major Bailey Hiles, Battalion Executive Officer, and Cadet Command Sergeant Major Nathaniel White will now jointly place the memorial wreath at the base of the War Memorial. Thank you, Commander Stefano, Executive Officer Hiles, and Sergeant Major White. We are certainly proud to say that the Connellsville Area High School has a JROTC program, and that these fine students and the entire Corps participated in today's parade and program. Let's please acknowledge our JROTC program students with a round of applause. Each year, we remind everyone that Memorial Day had its origins in 1868 as Decoration Day. That holiday honored soldiers who died in the Civil War by decorating their graves with flowers. Of course, we continue the tradition of placing flowers and flags on the graves of veterans and loved ones to this day. Decoration Day was officially renamed Memorial Day, effective in 1971 by federal law. Bearing in mind the origin of Memorial Day, the Civil War, we will now have the reading of President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, as presented by Keaton Detweiler. Keaton is the son of Regina and Chuck Detweiler of Dunbar Township, and is a junior at Connellsville Area High School. Keaton was this year's Voice of Democracy essay winner for VFW Post 21. Keaton, would you please present the Gettysburg Address?
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Thank you very much, Keaton, for an outstanding presentation and for your participation in the Voice of Democracy program. At this time, the Connellsville Area High School Marching Band, whose director is Mr. Jonathan Yotze, will present a musical selection entitled Troopers Salute by Jay Bocook and Barry Reese. Thank you, Mr. Yotze, band members, and drum majors Lauren Rodman and Hunter Rodman. I see we have with us today several distinguished guests. I'd like to introduce, first of all, the distinguished and honorable mayor of Connellsville, Greg Lincoln. Greg, would you raise your hand and be recognized here? Thank you, Greg, for being here. Also with us today, we have past Veterans of Foreign Wars Auxiliary State President Nancy Jones. Nancy, wave to the crowd, please. And last but not least, I have past Veterans of Foreign Wars State Commander, World War II veteran, and recent visitor to the White House Oval Office and visitor with the President of the United States, Mr. Alan Q. Jones. Alan, please wave. It's always great to have World War II represented at these programs. I don't think I see anyone else that needs introduced, is there? Okay, today's Memorial Day featured speaker is Pennsylvania Veterans of Foreign Wars State Commander for 2015-16, Glenn R. Umberger, Jr. Mr. Umberger is a member of the Klein, Steyer, McCann, VFW Post 7155 in Trapp, PA. He has served at the local VFW level as Post Commander and District Commander, and he has served at the State VFW level as State Surgeon and Junior Vice Commander. He has served at the National VFW level on the Military Services Committee and on 2 National Convention Committees, and he has earned many VFW honors and accolades. He began his military service as a private in the United States Army and ultimately rose to the rank of Major. He served overseas in Saudi Arabia in Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield and has received numerous military awards, including the Meritorious Service Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, and the Global War on Terrorism Medal, among many others. He has attended many military schools, is a graduate of Shippensburg University, is involved with numerous civic and volunteer organizations, and currently resides in Schwenksville, Pennsylvania. Let's please welcome today's featured speaker, past VFW State Commander Glenn Umberger, Jr., with a round of applause.
Good morning. It is truly an honor to be here amongst you all as we gather this day to celebrate and recognize and remember the selfless service of so many men and women that have worn their uniform of this great country. Today, as a community, we gather, but also as a nation we gather to recognize their selfless service. We started out in 1775 with a cry for freedom and independence. An unsung hero of the American Revolution is Nathaniel Greene. An unsuspecting individual, he was a Quaker and a pacifist. He had never been in a fight. However, he self-taught on military leadership, tactics, and fortifications, and became the youngest brigadier general in the Continental Army under General George Washington. In World War I, we know the story of Sergeant Alvin York, a conscientious objector who went forward when his country called to defend those that needed it, to fight for freedom and to fight for democracy. A lesser-known individual of World War I is Frank Buckles. Mr. Buckles passed away in 2011. He was the last American doughboy. He was an unassuming gentleman, quiet and of genteel manner and humor, but he went forward when his country asked. In World War II, we have Audie Murphy. Audie won every single Medal of Valor through 9 campaigns throughout the European theater, wounded 3 times. He answered his nation's call. In Korea, Colonel Ruby Bradley, a nurse who had served during who served during World War II, who was a prisoner of war in World War II, but still continued to fight. As her position was being overrun by 100,000 Chinese, she waited to make sure every wounded soldier was evacuated out of her hospital. In her last act, she jumped aboard the plane just as a mortar round took out the ambulance she had been riding in. In Vietnam, there were 8 Army nurses killed. First Lieutenant Sharon Lane is the only one of those who was killed by actual enemy conflict when a mortar round struck between her wards that she was serving in. Another nurse killed in Vietnam, Second Lieutenant Carol Drasba. Her life calling was to be a nurse. She grew up in Dunmore, Pennsylvania. When Vietnam started, she knew it was her calling, and she went forward to serve her country and her fellow man. She was killed in Vietnam in a helicopter crash. In more recent times, during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, many men and women have gone forward in the call of their country to fight for those that cannot fight, to look for the liberties and freedoms that we enjoy here today. It is an absolute honor to see so many young individuals here today and those of the Junior ROTC that are going forth on their adventure and their journey. You've heard a lot spoken about the Civil War this morning. That after the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln called for a day of decorating the graves of the recent war dead and to strew them with flowers. Today, not many recognize the real reason of Memorial Day. They believe it is a day off, a day of picnics, but it's a day of remembrance. On this past Saturday, I was in Arlington National Cemetery to see the families come in to pay the respects to their loved ones, to the stories told and all the stories that will never be told, the adventures and journeys that happened, and again, those that will never happen. I'd like to read for you the story of a young man from the Civil War. His name is John Lincoln Johnny Clem. Johnny Clem was born in Newark, Ohio on August 13th, 1851. At the age of 9, he ran away from home. And in May of 1861, he wanted to join the Army. When he arrived at the commander's office of the 3rd Ohio Regiment, he was told that the Army did not enlist infants. Undaunted at being turned down, he went to the 22nd Michigan Regiment, but the commander there told him the same thing. Still determined to join the Army, he decided to tag along with the 22nd Michigan anyway. Conducting himself like a regular drummer boy, he eventually wore the officers down, so they agreed to let him stay. Although he was not on the rolls technically, he did perform numerous camp duties and was paid the same $13 a month that regular soldiers received. Only his pay was donated from the officers. In April of 1862, at the Battle of Shiloh, Johnny Clem's drum was destroyed by an artillery round. From this, a news story developed, whereby he was now called Johnny Shiloh. At the Battle of Chickamauga, more than 1 year later, Clem was riding on an artillery caisson as the Union retreated. During the retreat, a Confederate officer noticed the cannon and caisson and started after it. As the officer was moving closer, Clem shouted out for him to surrender. Ignoring the boy, the officer came closer yet, and Clem was shot and killed. Clem shot and killed the officer. For his actions here, the newspapers got a hold of the story and dubbed him the drummer boy of Chickamauga. Clem stayed with the Army throughout the war, serving as a courier, and was wounded twice. Between Shiloh and Chickamauga, he was regularly enrolled in the service and thereafter received his own pay from the Army. After the Civil War, he tried to enter West Point, but was turned down because of his slim education. A personal appeal to President Ulysses S. Grant garnered him a second lieutenant commission. He became a colonel and assistant quartermaster general and retired from the Army as a major general in 1916. Let this story be a lesson to everyone here today. Accept those challenges. When you are told no, continue to pursue, continue to press on. If your endeavor is just and your reason right, you will be successful. Do not let others discourage you. Remember the stories that have come before you. Take the opportunity to ask those that wear the uniform or have worn the uniform about their service. For one day they will no longer be amongst us. They will be those that we are here today to remember. Those that gave their last full measure in the service of our country to protect the rights and freedoms that we so enjoy today. With that, I thank you for your presence. I thank you as a community for everything that you do for our great country. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Umberger, for your inspirational remarks. As is tradition at the Connellsville Memorial Day observance, we will now have the roll call reading of recently deceased area veterans. As always, each name that I read will have special meaning for family members and friends who knew these individuals personally. For many years, this reading was done by Mr. Earl Shank, World War I veteran. Then by Mr. Donald A. Cope, World War II veteran. And for the last 24 years by me, a 1969-70 Vietnam War veteran. Remembering those who have passed on, such as Mr. Shank and Mr. Cope, and on behalf of the Veterans Commission of Connellsville, the group in charge of this Memorial Day program, it is my honor to read the 2019 roll call of the 94 deceased area veterans for the past year. The roll call will be followed immediately by a rifle salute by the Veterans Commission Honor Guard. The rifle salute will then be followed by the playing of taps by Connellsville Area High School band members Reagan Daly and Josh Kraus. The roll call for deceased area veterans for the past year is as follows. Ivory Allen Akers, Angelo Alessantrino, Daniel Ansel, Andrew Anthony, Joseph P. Arnold, Charles Arvin Sr., Dr. James M. Benford, Robert Benson, Kenneth Berg, Darrell Berger, Anthony Bianchi, Joseph E. Boliban Sr., Robert Bradley, Richard S. Brown, Donald A. Burke, Robert Bible, Anthony Cataldi, Joseph J. Shirachetti, William Colbert, Bernard Cortiel, Eugene Jean Curtin Craig, Reverend Bruce A. Crosley, Altha Dale Darnell, Anthony Della Vecchia, Jules Bernard Dill, Thomas George Dodd, Joseph Fischnaller, Larry Lee Fosbrink, Gerald Gaborko, Glenn W. Geary Sr., Roger W. Geary, Donald Goodwin, Stephen Matthew Gordon, Michael Grego, Patrick Haynes, Gerald M. Hall, George Hallis, Alvin E. Bud Han, Edward William Harry Jr., Fred Hawkins, Edward Hazuda, James D. Hennon, Homer Lester Bud Hildebeidel, William D. Holsing, Donald Howard Holt, Forrest D. Dingle Hoover, James E. X, Sr., Harry W. Jellick, Alonzo Kaup, Jr., Jeffrey L. Kiefer, Walter Knight, John Koch Kocius, Burton Paul Krumenacker, William E. Coons, Erwin James Red Lechner, Harry E. Liza, James Edward Lynn, Charles A. Martin, James Martin, William R. McGinnis, Dennis McKendry, Fred V. Miller, William P. Miller, Mark M. Minard, John F. Jack Mundorf, Ira Murphy, Walter S. Nicholson, William D. Bill Overly, Patsy Patricelli, James William Hollyblank, Keith Daniel Hounds, Glenn Pritz, Paul Reed, Charles W. Bill Reschenberg, Edward B. Robbins, Albert Paul Rudolchek Sr., Lawrence J. Sonny Rule, James T. Sampson, Edward Shelton Sr., David L. Sherwood, Frederick Schultz, Earl S. Smalley Jr., James J. Smith, James Clifford Snyder, Anthony Wayne Thompson, Daniel Timms, Patrick D. Pat Vogt, Stephen Douglas Wells, Paul H. Williams, Edwin R. Witt Jr., Thomas Wolfe Jr., George Woodall, Michael J. Yosey, Joseph Peter Joe Zazula. May we have our rifle salute, please, followed by taps. Thank you, Honor Guard members and trumpeters Reagan Daly and Josh Krause. At this time, the Molinaro Band, under the direction of Francis Molinaro, will present the musical selection Battle Hymn. Thank you, Mr. Molinaro and band members. Reverend Schultes will now offer a closing prayer, and our program will conclude.
Receive the benediction, the good news, the good word for you today. Never forget the service of those who have done so in integrity. Follow the call of the Spirit with your spirit. Seek God. Trust in honorable leadership. Show affection for your neighbor and compassion for the less fortunate. Live in love, peace, fellowship, and prayer, which is the current of power. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and grant you his peace. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Schultes, and thank all of you very much for being present this morning. This concludes our program.